Hello, I'm Terry Kolath. I'm here today with Professor Adrian Kerr. We're talking about the next class up in our summer academy with Professor Adrian Kerr. This is the loss of the treasure ship Atocha and its remarkable discovery. So it was lost and now it's found.
Yes, indeed. 200 to 300 years later.
Oh my gosh.
In 1492, of course, Columbus stumbled across the Atlantic and discovered the Caribbean islands. The Spanish then sent their conquistadors over and they expanded into mainland Mexico. Of course, we know how the Aztecs were captured and the Incas were captured in Peru, and all the way up as far as New Mexico and down towards Colombia, became part of New Spain. Very wealthy indeed. The Spanish government brought across the wealth of the New World in the form of silver ingots. Silver was by far the most valuable item, for not gold, there's less of that, but there's a famous mine on the border of Peru, which is called Potosi, and it's the largest silver mine ever discovered in modern times, and it was mined to almost extinction over 200 years, and that was this foundation of Spain becoming the wealthiest country in Europe. Rather gruesome conditions, and the local inhabitants worked in the mines until they died, so it's a very sad story. But every year, the silver from Potosi was taken up the coast of Peru and taken to what is now Panama, and then trekked by mule across Panama to the two treasure ports on the Caribbean. And there the Spanish treasure fleets would come in once a year from Spain, and they would pick up emeralds from Colombia, silver from Potosi, gold, all sorts of valuable items. And of course, it was fair game. So the buccaneers, or pirates, they would have a go at these ships, and the British, of course, were always raiding these ships, so they formed a flotilla. And so there were something like 16 to 20 of these ships with guard galleons, as they were called, front and back, so that they would amass all this treasure once a year, take it back to Spain, and they would come into Cuba, and then they would set off in a train out of Cuba, coming up to the Florida Keys, then over towards Miami, picking up the Gulf Stream, and then that would take them over to Spain. And that was the tradition of bringing the wealth to Spain. Occasionally, the Brits got to the Central America collection ports and would raid them. And one famous occasion, Drake captured half of the silver coming out of Potosi, half, and he couldn't take the other half home. It was too much for his ship. That half was equivalent to the gross domestic product of England for the year. Okay. That half of one mule train. So it was big stuff. And so the Spanish built bigger and bigger ships, and they built them actually in the New World. And the Atocha was built as a guard galleon. It was the most sophisticated, heavily armed ship of its day. And it was the tail end of the treasure ship in 1622 that were going to make their traditional route out of Cuba and then into the Keys and then over to Spain. That year, there was so much treasure that they were delayed and delayed and delayed. More emeralds were coming out of Colombia, more silver ingots were coming out of that area. They had to go back to Central America to pick up some more silver, and they're about 6 to 8 weeks late, which we know in Florida brings you into hurricane season. So they all met in Cuba and said, let's go. They were very, very late, and their bad luck was that about a day out of Cuba, they actually were hit by a major hurricane. And the Atocha, being at the back and heavily laden with the most amount of ingots in the base of the ship, was thrust onto a coral reef. People saw it, and then it was crashed down onto the coral reef, and it broke in two, and it was never seen again. The following day, they marked it. There were a few bits left. 2 or 3 people survived and amassed. Then another small hurricane came by, and the site was lost forever.
Oh my God.
The people who survived actually recorded it on the map, because from Cuba they sent out diving expeditions using old-fashioned diving bells, but they couldn't find the site, although they'd been marked on a map of where it was with an X. That map lay for hundreds of years, 400 years, in Spain. As time went on, people thought it was actually in a different part of the Florida Keys, and they wasted time and gave up. And then in 1940s, the French Jacques Cousteau developed the self-contained breathing apparatus SCUBA. And so the opportunity to start looking for treasure ships increased. And one of his assistants decided to set up their own company and look for the ships that had sunk during the many occasions when they were attacked or hit by hurricane over 200 or 300 years.
All on the same path.
He's particularly selected the Atocha convoy because it's one of the wealthiest, and it's also it was actually wrecked on land. So he said it's not going to be a long way out to sea, and he and his two sons started work, and for many, many years they had no progress. And then one day they found a silver bar lying in the sand. And they checked the number of the bar, because each one's numbered, and my goodness, this is one on the manifest of the Atocha.
Ah.
And so suddenly they accelerated, and they used two different techniques where other diving companies had not developed. One is magnetometers, so you can actually go over the sand with a metal detector underwater. And secondly, they diverted the propellers of the ships downwards, so that blew away the sand, so they were able to move much quicker through the dive site. And I'm not going to spoil the story, but one day they actually discovered a whole stack of silver ingots lying on top of each other, which is in the base of the ship, of the Atocha. And the rest is an exciting story.
Oh, I guess it's an exciting story.
Yeah. And if you go to Key West today, right near Mallory Square, there is the Atocha Museum.
Yes.
And you can see some of the examples of the great jewels, emeralds particularly, chains, gold bars, silver bars. And funny enough, they decided that they wanted to actually give contact with this treasure rather than just simply looking at it through a perspex. So they built a box, and you could put your hand inside the box, and you can actually touch a gold bar. But they're so designed that you couldn't actually grab it and pull it out. It's very cleverly designed. Until one day, a robber and his friend smashed the box, stole it at 5 o'clock in the evening, and it's only in April this year that they actually tracked him down, and he and his partner in crime will be prosecuted. But that bar, which is worth $50,000, is still missing.
Oh my gosh, so interesting. Well, won't you join us? The loss of the treasure ship Atocha and its remarkable discovery. Professor Adrian Kerr, Monday, June 25th.